The fluorescent lights of St. Helena General Hospital's fourth-floor corridor flickered twice, and then the screaming started. Rapid. Furious. Italian. Every word sliced through the sterile air like a blade, bouncing off the walls with enough venom to make the night shift nurses freeze mid-step. One dropped her clipboard. Another pressed herself flat against the supply closet door, her face drained of color. Non è mai toccar. Vattene via. Giuro su Dio. The voice belonged to a man who had made grown men weep. A man whose name was whispered in the shadows of New York's underworld with equal parts fear and reverence. A man who, even now, recovering from a gunshot wound that should have killed him, commanded the kind of terror that most people only read about in crime novels. Dante Vallée. And he was demanding blood. The chaos was reaching a crescendo. 2 security guards had already tried to enter room 417. Both had retreated with their hands raised, their faces pale. The patient had ripped out his foreline and was threatening to do far worse to anyone who came near him. Someone needs to sedate him, Dr. Catherine Reeves hissed, pressing her back against the nurse's station. She was the attending physician, a woman with 23 years of experience, and even she refused to cross that threshold. Where's the sedation team? 10 minutes out, someone answered. They're dealing with a psych emergency on 7. We don't have 10 minutes. He's going to tear his stitches. He's going to bleed out on that floor and then I'm going to have the entire. She stopped herself, glancing around at the terrified staff. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Everyone knew what Dante Vallée was. Everyone knew what would happen if he died on their watch. The Vallée family didn't forgive. They didn't forget. They collected. And that's when Isabella Marino rounded the corner. She moved quietly, she always did, her soft-soled shoes barely making a sound against the linoleum. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical bun, a few stubborn curls escaping near her temples. Her scrubs were the standard hospital blue, unremarkable. Her face was calm. Impossibly, almost unnervingly calm. At 31 years old, Bella had worked the night shift at St. Helena for 6 years. She'd held the hands of dying patients. She'd delivered impossible news to families. She'd coded patients for 4 to 5 minutes straight without losing her composure. Nothing rattled her. That's what everyone said. Nothing rattles Bella Marino. But tonight, something flickered behind her dark eyes as she approached the cluster of frozen nurses. Something that might have been curiosity. Or might have been recognition. What's happening? She asked, her voice low and steady. Dr. Reeves grabbed her arm. Bella, thank God. The patient in 417, the gunshot from 3 nights ago, his completely destabilized. Ripped out his lines. His screaming in Italian, threatening everyone who tries to enter. We need the sedation team but they are. I heard. Bella glanced toward room 417. Through the reinforced window, she could see the shadow of a large figure pacing. Moving. Hurting himself with every step he took. Has anyone tried actually talking to him? The silence that followed was answer enough. Dr. Reeves lowered her voice to barely a whisper. Bella, his connected. Organized crime. The men in suits downstairs? They're not hospital security. They're his people. We're not equipped for. He's also a patient who's going to bleed to death if someone doesn't stabilize him in the next few minutes. Bella said it simply. Without judgment. Without fear. She reached for a fresh 4 kit from the supply cart and tucked it under her arm. Then she grabbed sterile bandages. Antiseptic. A pair of gloves. Dr. Reeves stared at her. What are you doing? My job. Bella, he's dangerous. He's scared. The word hung in the air, strange and impossible. Dante Vallée, the man whose name made prosecutors retire early, whose reputation had been built on a foundation of blood and silence, scared? But Bella had already turned toward room 417. The screaming had stopped. Somehow, that was worse. In the sudden, suffocating silence, Bella could hear her own heartbeat. Could feel the weight of every eye on her back. Could sense the collective held breath of an entire floor. Her hand closed around the door handle. And somewhere in the back of her mind, a voice she hadn't heard in 15 years whispered something she'd spent her entire adult life trying to forget. You know exactly what you're walking into, Isabella. You've always known. She pushed open the door. The room smelled of blood and rage. Bella's eyes adjusted to the dim lighting. Someone had smashed the overhead fixture, leaving only the pale glow from the monitors and the city lights bleeding through the window blinds. Glass crunched beneath her shoes as she stepped inside, and she made a mental note of where the largest shards had fallen. Exit blocked. Patient mobile. Elevated heart rate, she could hear it on the monitor. 118. 120. Climbing. And there he was. Dante Valet stood near the window, his massive frame silhouetted against the Manhattan skyline. He was tall, at least 6'3", with shoulders that seemed to fill the room. His hospital gown had been torn open, revealing a torso wrapped in blooded bandages. The gunshot wound was on his left side, just beneath his ribs. A through and through, she'd read in his chart. 2 inches higher and it would have punctured his lung. He was gripping the window ledge with white-knuckled hands, his back to her, his breathing ragged and uneven. And he was trembling. Not from cold. Not from weakness. From something far more dangerous. I said. His voice came out like gravel scraping against stone, the Italian accent thick and menacing. Get out. He didn't turn around. Bella didn't leave. Instead, she set her supplies down on the metal tray beside the bed, the soft clink of the fork the only sound she made. She pulled on her gloves with practiced efficiency, snap, snap, and waited. The silence stretched between them like a wire about to break. You're bleeding through your bandages, she said finally. Her voice was quiet but clear. Unhurried. Your stitches have torn. You have approximately 15 to 20 minutes before you lose enough blood to lose consciousness. After that, it's emergency surgery, assuming you survive the transfer. Dante's shoulders tightened. His knuckles went from white to bloodless. I don't need your help. Your body disagrees. He spun then, faster than a man with a hole in his side should have been able to move, and Bella got her first real look at him. Dark hair, disheveled and damp with sweat. A face that might have been carved from marble if marble could hold that much fury. Sharp jaw. Sharper cheekbones. And eyes, God, those eyes, the color of aged whiskey, burning with enough fire to scorch anyone stupid enough to hold his gaze. He was beautiful in the way that predators were beautiful. In the way that storms were beautiful. In the way that dangerous things always were. You think you know what I need? He stalked toward her, each step deliberate, his bare feet leaving bloody prints on the floor. You think you can walk in here and fix me with your bandages and your soft voice and your... He stopped. Because Bella hadn't moved. Hadn't flinched. Hadn't stepped back. Hadn't even blinked. She stood exactly where she was, her hands clasped loosely in front of her, her dark eyes fixed on his face with an expression he couldn't read. An expression no one had ever looked at him with before. She wasn't afraid of him. And somehow, impossibly, that made him more afraid than he'd been in years. Who are you? He demanded, his voice dropping to something low and dangerous. Bella tilted her head slightly. The movement was small, almost imperceptible, but something in it made Dante's breath catch. I'm the nurse who's going to save your life tonight, she said. Whether you want me to or not. You don't know who I am. I know exactly who you are, Mr. Valet. The name landed like a punch. His jaw clenched. His hands that had done terrible things, hands that had built empires and destroyed enemies, curled into fists at his sides. Then you know what I'm capable of. I know what you want everyone to believe you're capable of. Bella took a single step toward him. Just one. But it closed the distance between them enough that she could see the rapid pulse jumping in his throat. Could see the fine tremor in his clenched fists. Could see the thing he was trying so desperately to hide. I also know, she continued, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper, that you haven't slept in 4 days. That you've been refusing pain medication since the moment you arrived. That every time someone enters this room, your heart rate spikes to dangerous levels and you lash out before they can get close enough to see. She paused. To see what, Mr. Valet? His nostrils flared. A vein pulsed in his temple. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? Another step. I've been a nurse for over a decade. I've treated soldiers. Survivors of violence. Men who've seen things that would break most people. And every single one of them had the same look in their eyes that you have right now. And what look is that? Bella met his gaze without wavering. The look of someone who's terrified that if they fall asleep, they won't wake up. The words hit him like bullets. For a moment, just a moment, something cracked behind Dante's eyes. Something raw and wounded and human flickered through the carefully constructed mask of rage. And in that moment, Bella saw him. Not the Mafia boss. Not the monster. Not the legend that men spoke of in whispers. She saw a man standing alone in a hospital room at 2 a.m, bleeding and exhausted and so terrified of his own vulnerability that he'd rather die than let anyone see it. She saw someone who reminded her, with painful clarity, of the person she used to be. The bullet didn't just tear through muscle and tissue, Bella said softly. It passed within millimeters of your spinal column. The doctors didn't tell you that, did they? They were too afraid. But I read your chart. All of it. Dante's face went pale. You've been feeling it. The numbness in your left leg. The pins and needles that come and go. You've been telling yourself it's nothing, just a side effect of the trauma, but every time you close your eyes, you imagine waking up paralyzed. Unable to move. Unable to defend yourself. She stepped closer still, close enough now to touch him if she reached out. That's why you won't sleep. That's why you attack anyone who comes near you. Because as long as you're fighting, as long as you're moving, you can pretend it isn't real. You can pretend you're not. Stop. The word came out broken. Shattered. And for the first time since she'd entered the room, Dante Valet looked like what he actually was. A man who was terrified of losing everything. Bella waited. She didn't push. Didn't press her advantage. Didn't try to force him to admit anything more than he already had. She simply stood there, her presence a strange and unexpected anchor in the storm that had been raging inside him for days. Finally, Dante's shoulders sagged. The fight drained out of him like water from a broken vessel, and when he spoke again, his voice was hoarse. How did you know? Because I've seen it before. Bella gestured toward the bed. Sit down. Let me look at your wound. The numbness you're feeling, it's likely inflammation pressing against the nerve, not permanent damage. But the more you move, the more you bleed, the worse it's going to get. He didn't move. Please. That word, please, did something strange to him. When was the last time someone had said please to him? When was the last time someone had asked instead of demanded, requested instead of commanded? He couldn't remember. Slowly, painfully, Dante moved toward the bed. As Bella worked, cleaning the wound, replacing the torn stitches with careful, precise movements, applying fresh bandages, she learned more about him. Not from what he said, because he said almost nothing. But from the small things. The way he gritted his teeth against the pain instead of crying out. The way his eyes tracked her every movement, not with suspicion, but with something closer to fascination. The way his breathing slowly, gradually, began to even out. And the way, when she finally stepped back and pulled off her gloves, he looked at her like she was something he'd never encountered before. Something he didn't know how to categorize. Something dangerous. Who are you? He asked again, but this time the question was different. Softer. More genuine. Bella gathered her supplies and moved toward the door. I told you. I'm your nurse. No. His voice stopped her with her hand on the handle. That's what you do. That's not who you are. She turned back, and for just a moment, her carefully constructed calm wavered. Something flickered in her dark eyes, a shadow of old pain, of buried secrets, of a past she had worked so hard to escape. Get some sleep, Mr. Valet, she said quietly. I'll be back in a few hours to check on you. She opened the door. Wait. She paused. What's your name? She shouldn't tell him. She knew that. Knew that letting someone like him know anything personal about her was a risk she couldn't afford to take. But something in his voice, something tired and broken and unexpectedly honest, made her answer anyway. Isabella, she said. But everyone calls me Bella. And then she was gone, the door closing softly behind her, leaving Dante alone with the beeping monitors and the distant sounds of the hospital and the strange, unfamiliar feeling taking root in his chest. It took him a long moment to recognize what it was. Hope. For the first time in 4 days, he closed his eyes. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, he slept. 3 hours later, everything went to hell. Bella was at the nurse's station, updating charts in the pre-dawn quiet, when she heard it, a sound that didn't belong. Not the usual hospital symphony of beeping monitors and squeaking gurneys. Not the shuffle of tired feet or the murmur of shift change conversations. This was different. The elevator at the far end of the corridor dinged. At 5:47 a.m. When no surgeries were scheduled. When no visitors were allowed. When the only people who should be on this floor were the skeleton crew of night shift staff. Bella's pen stilled against the paper. The elevator doors slid open with a mechanical whisper, and 3 men stepped out. They wore suits, expensive ones, Italian cut, but something was wrong. These weren't Dante's men. She'd seen his security team, the ones who rotated shifts in the lobby. Those men moved with professional precision, their threat contained, controlled. These men moved like predators who'd already chosen their prey. The one in front was tall and lean, with silver hair slicked back and eyes the color of winter frost. He walked with a slight limp, an old injury, Bella noted automatically, and his right hand stayed suspiciously close to the inside of his jacket. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" Dr. Reeves appeared from the break room, her coffee cup frozen halfway to her lips. "Visiting hours don't start until." "We're here to see an old friend," the silver-haired man said. His accent was thicker than Dante's, rougher. Like gravel soaked in acid. "Room 417. Bella's blood turned to ice. "I'm sorry, but that patient isn't receiving visitors without prior authorization." The man smiled. It was the kind of smile that made children have nightmares. "I think you'll find we have all the authorization we need." He reached inside his jacket. Time slowed. Bella saw the glint of metal. Saw Dr. Reeves' eyes widen in recognition. Saw the other 2 men fan out, blocking the exits. And she knew, with the kind of bone-deep certainty that comes from experience you wish you didn't have, exactly what was about to happen. They weren't here to visit. They were here to finish what the bullet had started. "Everyone stays calm," the silver-haired man said, pulling out a suppressed pistol with casual ease. "We're not here for you. We're here for Valet. No one needs to die except the man who should already be dead." The floor went silent except for the thundering of hearts and the sharp intake of breath from a young nurse named Rachel who'd only been working there 3 months. Bella's mind raced through calculations. 3 armed men. 7 staff members on the floor. Dante, injured and vulnerable in 417. Security downstairs who wouldn't respond in time even if someone managed to trigger an alarm. And something else, something that made her stomach twist with a recognition she'd spent 15 years trying to bury. She knew the silver-haired man. Not personally. But she knew his reputation. Knew his methods. Knew his name. Vincent the Surgeon Romano. Called that not because of any medical skills, but because of how precisely he carved up his enemies. How methodically he dismantled rival families. How he'd been hunting the Valet family for 2 decades, ever since Dante's father had. No. Don't think about that. Don't remember. Don't let them see that you know. But it was too late. Vincent's cold eyes had found her, and something flickered across his face. Recognition? No. Something else. Something worse. Interest. "You," he said, gesturing with the gun. "The pretty nurse. You've been taking care of our friend Dante, haven't you?" Bella didn't answer. Vincent smiled wider. "I can always tell. There's something different about the ones who get close to him. Something in the eyes. Like they've been touched by darkness and didn't run away." He tilted his head. "What's your name, beautiful?" "Leave her alone." Dr. Reeves stepped forward, her voice shaking but determined. "If you have business with your friend, then deal with him. The rest of us are just." The gun swung toward her. "Just what? Innocent?" "In my experience, Doctor, no one in Dante Valet's orbit stays innocent for long." Bella made a decision. It was the kind of decision that, once made, couldn't be taken back. The kind that would shatter the careful life she'd built, the identity she'd crafted, the distance she'd maintained from a world she'd sworn never to return to. But Dante was sleeping, finally, peacefully sleeping, 3 doors away. And these men were here to execute him in his bed. She stepped forward. "Vincent Romano," she said quietly. The temperature in the corridor dropped 10 degrees. Vincent's eyes snapped to her, sharp as broken glass. His finger tensed on the trigger. "How does a pretty little nurse know my name?" Bella's voice came out steady, even as her pulse hammered in her throat. Everyone in New York knows your name. You're famous. The surgeon. The man who took down the Torino family in '08. Who survived 3 assassination attempts. Who once killed 7 men with nothing but a broken wine bottle and a dinner fork. Vincent preened slightly, his ego stroked. But his eyes remained suspicious. Flattery won't save your patient, nurse. I'm not trying to save him. The words hung in the air like a blade. Dr. Reeves gasped. Rachel made a sound like a wounded animal. Even Vincent's men exchanged glances. Bella continued, her voice dropping to something colder, harder. I'm trying to save you. Vincent laughed, a short, sharp bark of disbelief. Save me? From what? A half-dead man bleeding in a hospital bed. From the mistake you're about to make. She took another step forward, and something in her posture changed. Something subtle but profound. The way her weight shifted. The way her hands hung at her sides. The way her eyes, those soft, compassionate eyes that had soothed so many patients, suddenly looked like they'd seen things. Done things. You think he's alone up here, she said. You think because his regular security is downstairs, because he's wounded, because it's the middle of the night, that he's vulnerable. Isn't he? Bella smiled. It wasn't a nurse's smile. It wasn't kind or comforting or warm. It was the kind of smile that Vincent Romano had seen before, in mirrors, in the faces of men who'd survived wars they shouldn't have, in the eyes of killers who'd learned to hide in plain sight. 3 nights ago, Bella said, Dante Valle was shot by a sniper positioned in the building across from his restaurant. The bullet was .338 Lapua Magnum, fired from approximately 600 meters. Professional work. Clean. Should have been fatal. Vincent's eyes narrowed. But it wasn't. Because someone pushed him. Someone saw the laser sight a fraction of a second before the trigger was pulled and shoved him just enough to turn a kill shot into a wound. She paused. Would you like to know who that someone was? The corridor was so quiet you could hear the fluorescent lights humming. Or, Bella continued, would you like to know why I've been assigned as his nurse? Why, out of all the medical professionals in this hospital, I'm the one who's been taking care of him. She reached into her pocket. Every gun in the corridor swung toward her. She pulled out a small silver pendant on a chain. It was old, tarnished with age, but the symbol engraved on it was unmistakable. The Romano family crest. But modified. Changed. Combined with something else. The Valle family crest. 2 bloodlines. 1 pendant. Vincent's face went white. Impossible, he breathed. My name, Bella said quietly, is Isabella Marino. But that's not the name I was born with. She lifted her chin, and for the first time in 15 years, spoke the truth she'd buried so deep she'd almost convinced herself it was a lie. I was born Isabella Lucia Romano Valle. Daughter of Lucia Romano and Michael Valle. Granddaughter of Antonio Romano and Rose Valle. The child who was supposed to unite 2 families. She met Vincent's horrified gaze. The child whose birth started the war you're still fighting. Vincent's hand began to shake. You're dead. You died in the fire. Everyone knows. Everyone knows what they were told. What they needed to believe. What kept the war from consuming every family in New York. She took another step forward. But I'm very much alive, Uncle Vincent. And if you take one more step toward that room, toward the man I've spent 3 nights keeping alive, I'll show you exactly whose blood runs stronger in my veins. The silence that followed was deafening. Then, somewhere down the corridor, a door opened. Dante's voice, rough with sleep but alert, drifted toward them. Bella. And in that single word, her name spoken like a question, like a prayer, like a claim, everything changed. The world held its breath. Dante appeared in the doorway of room 417, one hand gripping the frame for support, his hospital gown hanging loose over the fresh bandages Bella had applied just hours ago. His eyes swept the scene, Vincent's gun, the terrified staff, Bella standing between them all like a barrier made of secrets and steel. And the pendant in her hand. Even from 20 feet away, he could see it. Could recognize it. Could feel his world tilt off its axis. Vincent, he said, his voice carrying the kind of authority that comes from a lifetime of being obeyed. Lower the gun. Vincent's laugh was bitter, twisted. You don't give me orders, boy. Not anymore. Not after what your family did to mine. What my family did. Dante took a step forward, and Bella saw him wince, the movement pulling at his stitches. Your brother came after my father first. Your brother broke the accords. Because of her. The words exploded from Vincent like shrapnel. His gun swung wildly between Bella and Dante, his control fracturing. Because of the girl who was supposed to fix everything. Unite the bloodlines. End the old feuds. His eyes were wild now, decades of rage finally boiling over. My sister Lucia and your uncle Michael, they thought their love could change everything. Thought their child would be a bridge between our families. He spat on the hospital floor. Instead, she became the reason for everything that followed. Bella's voice cut through the hatred like a scalpel. I was 3 years old. Everyone turned to her. I was 3 years old when the fire happened. When my parents died. When both families decided it was easier to pretend I died with them than to figure out what to do with a child who belonged to both and neither. She looked at Vincent, and for the first time, he saw Lucia in her face. His sister's eyes. His sister's stubborn chin. You want to blame someone for the war? Blame the men who couldn't see past their own pride. Who turned a tragedy into an excuse for 20 more years of bloodshed. Who let a 3-year-old girl disappear into the foster system rather than admit she existed. Her voice grew stronger, harder. I spent 15 years becoming someone else. Learning to heal instead of hurt. Choosing to save lives instead of taking them. And I was doing just fine until 3 nights ago, when I saw a laser sight on a man's chest and my body moved before my brain could stop it. She turned to Dante. I saved you because that's what I do. That's who I chose to become. Not a Romano. Not a valet. Just Bella Marino, a nurse who helps people. Dante's eyes were unreadable, but his voice, when he spoke, was rough with something that might have been wonder. You're the reason I'm alive. Yes. You pushed me. Yes. You knew someone was trying to kill me before it happened. Bella's jaw tightened. I recognized the setup. The positioning. The timing. It was familiar. Familiar how? But before she could answer, Vincent made his move. It happened fast, faster than should have been possible for a man with an old leg injury. He lunged forward, grabbing Rachel, the young nurse, and pressing the gun to her temple. She whimpered, tears streaming down her face. Enough talking, he snarled. You want to pretend you're not one of us, little ghost? Fine. But your patient dies today. The valet line ends here. Let her go, Bella said, her voice steady even as her heart hammered. She has nothing to do with this. Neither did my son. Vincent's voice cracked. Dante's father killed him anyway. 16 years old. Shot him down like a dog because he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Dante's face went pale. Vincent, that was... war? Business? Which excuse did you tell yourself? Vincent's grip on Rachel tightened. Now you'll know how it feels to watch an innocent die because of who you are. That's when Bella did something no one expected. She laughed. Soft, bitter, and absolutely without humor. You think you're the only one who lost someone innocent. She pulled up her left sleeve, revealing a pattern of old scars that made Dr. Reeves gasp. You think I spent those 15 years in foster care playing with dolls and going to school dances? The scars were deliberate. Methodical. The kind that came from torture, not accident. When certain people found out who I really was, what my blood meant, they tried to use me. Leverage. A bargaining chip in your stupid war. And when that didn't work. She let the sleeve fall. So don't talk to me about innocence lost, uncle. We're all walking graveyards of who we used to be. Something shifted in Dante's expression as he looked at her, really looked at her. This woman who'd hidden strength beneath gentleness, who'd chosen healing over vengeance, who'd saved his life and asked for nothing in return. Who was, impossibly, both his salvation and his destruction. Because if she was who she claimed to be, if her blood was what united and divided their families, then being near her was the most dangerous thing he could do. And walking away from her was already impossible. Vincent, Dante said, his voice different now. Softer. Let the girl go, and we can discuss this. Man to man. The old way. Vincent laughed bitterly. The old way died with our fathers. No, Bella said suddenly. It didn't. She reached into her pocket again, slowly this time, telegraphing every movement, and pulled out a second item. A phone. 3 nights ago, after I pushed Dante, after the shooter fled, I did something I shouldn't have. I took a photo of the shell casing before the police arrived. Vincent went very still. It had an engraving. A signature. Something only someone familiar with our world would recognize. She held up the phone, showing the image. The mark of the Corsini family. The corridor erupted. Vincent's men exchanged shocked glances. Dr. Reeves looked confused. Rachel whimpered against the gun. But Dante went absolutely lethal. The Corsinis are dead, he said, his voice like ice. I killed the last of them myself 2 years ago. Did you? Bella asked. Or did you kill who you were told were the last of them? She looked between Dante and Vincent. Someone has been playing us. Playing both families. Orchestrating hits, framing others, keeping the war going because chaos is profitable. Vincent's grip on the gun loosened slightly. You're lying. Am I? How did you know Dante would be here, Vincent? Who told you he was vulnerable? Who gave you the room number, the floor, the exact time when security would be lightest? Vincent's face began to change as realization dawned. Someone who wanted you to finish what they started. Someone who knew that if you killed Dante, his men would hunt you down. And if Dante killed you first, the Romanos would retaliate. Either way, both families destroy each other, and someone else picks up the pieces. She took a step forward. We're not enemies, Vincent. We're pawns. And someone's been playing us for 20 years. The silence that followed was deafening. Then Vincent's phone rang. The sound was jarring, ordinary in its electronic insistence, but Vincent's face went white when he saw the number. Answer it, Bella said. Put it on speaker. Vincent's hand shook as he pressed the button. A voice filled the corridor, smooth, cultured, amused. Vincent, have you completed the task? Everyone recognized that voice. Everyone knew who it belonged to. And everyone understood, in that moment, how completely they'd been played. It was Dr. Alessandro Harrison, the hospital's chief of surgery. Dante's attending physician for the past 3 days. The man who'd had complete access to his medical records, his vulnerability, his schedule. The man who was supposed to be saving lives. Alessandro, Vincent breathed, and in that name was 20 years of questions suddenly answered. Oh dear, the voice on the phone said, no longer smooth, sharp now with disappointment. I take it from your tone that our little ghost has been telling stories. How inconvenient. The line went dead. And that's when they heard it, the sound of multiple footsteps in the stairwell. Coming up. Fast. His cleaning house, Bella said, her mind racing. He's going to eliminate everyone who knows. The stairwell door exploded open. Men in tactical gear flooded out, weapons raised. But these weren't police. Weren't SWAT. The man in front pulled off his mask, revealing a face that Bella recognized from old photographs, from newspaper clippings, from nightmares she'd had as a child. Marco Corsini. Very much alive. Very much smiling. Hello, little ghost, he said. We've been looking for you for such a long time. And that's when Dante did something that shocked everyone, including himself. He stepped in front of Bella. Wounded, bleeding, barely able to stand, he positioned himself between her and the danger. You want her? His voice was steel wrapped in silk. You'll have to go through me. Vincent looked at his niece, at the man protecting her, at the enemies surrounding them all. And made a choice that would have been unthinkable 5 minutes ago. He moved to stand beside Dante. And me. For the first time in 20 years, a Romano and a Valet stood on the same side. United by the woman whose existence had once torn them apart. United against the real enemy. And in that hospital corridor, at 6:15 on a Thursday morning, the war that had defined 2 families finally found its true battlefield. 27 seconds. Marco Corsini's voice was casual, almost bored, as he checked his watch. That's how long you have before the gas in the ventilation system reaches this floor. Rachel, still trapped in Vincent's loosened grip, let out a sob. Gas. Dr. Reeves stepped backward, her hand moving instinctively to cover her mouth. Nothing fatal, Marco assured them, his smile never wavering. We need you alive. Well, most of you. The beautiful Isabella especially. She's the key to everything. Key to what? Dante's voice was razor-sharp despite the pain radiating from his wound. Marco's smile widened. To the truth about that night. The fire. What really happened to her parents? The corridor seemed to tilt. Bella's voice came out strangled. They died. The house burned. Everyone knows. Everyone knows what Alessandro wanted them to know. Marco pulled out a tablet, swiping it to life. But you've been having the dreams, haven't you, Isabella? The ones where you can smell smoke but never see fire? Where you hear your mother screaming but the sound is wrong? Bella's face went white. How could he know about the dreams? 15 seconds, Marco continued conversationally. I'd cover your faces if I were you. The gas won't kill you, but the hallucinations can be intense. That's when Dante noticed it. Marco's men were all wearing specialized masks under their tactical gear. Bella, Dante said urgently, turning to her. Whatever happens, whatever you see, remember it's not real. But Bella wasn't listening. She was staring at the tablet in Marco's hand, at an image that couldn't exist. A photograph. Of her parents. Taken 3 days after they supposedly died. That's impossible, she breathed. 5 seconds, Marco said. Then the world exploded into chaos. The gas hit them like a physical force, invisible, odorless, but immediately disorienting. The fluorescent lights began to streak and blur. The walls seemed to breathe. And then, the visions started. But these weren't random hallucinations. These were memories. Bella was 3 years old again, standing in a room she'd forgotten existed. Her mother was there, Lucia Romano, beautiful and fierce, packing a suitcase with shaking hands. We have to go, baby, her mother was saying. Before they find out what Daddy did. What did Daddy do? Little Bella asked. Her mother's face crumpled. He made a deal with the devil. The scene shifted, fractured, reformed. Now she was in a different room. Sterile. Medical. Dr. Alessandro Harrison was there, but younger, his hair still dark. He was standing over 2 bodies on metal tables. Her parents. But they were breathing. The sedative will keep them under for 72 hours, Alessandro was saying to someone outside Bella's field of vision. Enough time to convince both families they are dead. To start the war properly. And the girl. The girl goes into the system. We'll track her, of course. Study her. She's the only successful merge of both bloodlines. Her DNA could be worth billions to the right buyers. Another shift. Bella was older now, maybe 7 or 8, in a foster home she remembered all too well. The bad one. The one with the scars. But this time she could see what she hadn't seen then, cameras in the corners. Medical equipment in the basement. Files with her name that said Subject 23, Romano Vallejo hybrid. They hadn't been random foster homes. They'd been laboratories. And she'd been the experiment. Bella. Dante's voice cut through the vision like a blade. She blinked, gasping, and found herself on the floor of the hospital corridor. Dante was holding her, his arms wrapped around her despite his own obvious distress. His eyes were dilated, fighting his own visions, but he was anchoring himself to her. Choosing her reality over whatever horror the gas was showing him. It's not real, he said, but his voice was uncertain. Because they both knew, somehow, impossibly, that what they were seeing wasn't entirely hallucination. It was memory. Suppressed, hidden, chemically locked away, but memory nonetheless. Vincent was on his knees nearby, tears streaming down his face, reaching for something that wasn't there. Lucia, he was sobbing. Sister, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I didn't know he was keeping you alive. Dr. Reeves was pressed against the wall, her eyes wide with chemical terror, but also with recognition. Because she was seeing her own memories now. All those times Alessandro had requested specific patients, ran unauthorized tests, collected DNA samples that went to labs she didn't recognize. She was seeing the scope of it. 20 years of using St. Helena Hospital as a cover for something monstrous. But it was Rachel, young, terrified Rachel, who saw the most important thing. Because the gas didn't give her visions of the past. It showed her the present. They're still alive, she gasped, pointing at nothing the others could see. Down in the basement. Sub-level 3. The restricted ward. They're keeping people down there. Dozens of them. Marco laughed, the sound distorted and strange through the gas's effects. Clever girl. The gas works differently on those without the bloodlines. Shows them what is instead of what was. He moved closer, his men flanking him, their masks making them immune to the disorientation. Yes, we have quite the collection downstairs. Failed experiments, mostly. People who had one bloodline but not both. People who couldn't merge the genetic markers properly. He knelt beside Bella, reaching out to touch her face. Dante snarled and tried to intercept, but his wounded body wouldn't cooperate. But you, Isabella, you were perfect. The only success. Your blood carries antibodies that shouldn't exist. Healing factors that defy medical science. You're not just a nurse who helps people heal, you literally accelerate healing in anyone you touch. Haven't you noticed? How your patients recover faster. How Dante's wound is already half-healed after just hours of your care. Bella's mind reeled. Every patient she'd ever treated, every miraculous recovery she'd witnessed. You're worth billions, Marco continued. To the right pharmaceutical company. To the right government. To anyone who wants to create super soldiers or cure cancer or live forever. And Alessandro has been studying you for 20 years, waiting for the perfect moment to harvest what makes you special. But he needs both bloodlines active in your system, he added, his smile turning predatory. He needs you emotionally connected to both families. Stressed. Pushed to your limits. In love. His eyes moved between Bella and Dante. And look at that. You're falling for each other. Just like Alessandro planned. The gas was starting to clear, the visions fading, but the revelations remained, sharp and devastating. Bella looked at Dante, seeing him clearly for the first time, not as a patient, not as a mafia boss, but as another pawn in Alessandro's game. They'd been maneuvered together. The shooting, her assignment to his case, even Vincent's arrival, all of it orchestrated. The shooter, she said suddenly, the pieces clicking together. It was never about killing you. It was about bringing you here. To this hospital. To me. Dante's jaw clenched. And I walked right into it. We all did, Vincent said, struggling to his feet. 20 years of war, and we were just lab rats in his maze. Marco stood, brushing imaginary dust from his expensive suit. Now you're getting it. But here's the beautiful part, it doesn't matter that you know. Because in about 30 seconds, this entire floor is going to be flooded with security. Alessandro's security. And you're all going to be sedated and taken below. He checked his watch. Well, all except Mr. Valet. He's outlived his usefulness. The only thing Alessandro needs from him now is his death, to trigger Isabella's full emotional response. To activate every dormant marker in her DNA. Marco pulled out a different gun. This one was loaded with something that looked medical rather than ballistic. Don't worry, Dante. It'll be quick. Painless. Almost merciful, considering what your father did to my family. He aimed. But Bella was already moving. What happened next would be debated, discussed, and dissected for years to come by anyone who survived to tell about it. Bella didn't just stand up. She changed. The timid nurse, the gentle healer, the woman who'd spent 15 years hiding, she disappeared. In her place stood something else. Something that 20 years of genetic manipulation and bloodline merging had created. Something Alessandro Harrison had never fully understood. Because he'd been so focused on her blood, on her DNA, on what she could do for others, that he'd never asked the most important question. What could she do for herself? Bella moved faster than should have been possible. Not superhuman, but perfectly efficient. Every motion calculated, every step precise. She grabbed the four-pole next to Rachel and spun it like a staff, catching Marco's gun hand and sending the weapon flying. His men raised their rifles, but she was already among them. She didn't fight like a nurse. She didn't fight like a Romano or a valet. She fought like something new. Something that had been sleeping for 20 years, waiting for the moment when all the walls came down, all the lies were exposed, and the only thing left was survival. And love. Because as she moved, disarming, disabling, protecting, her eyes kept finding Dante. checking on him, making sure he was safe. She wasn't fighting for herself. She was fighting for the future she just discovered she wanted. A future with him. Just as suddenly as it began, it was over. Marco's men were on the ground, unconscious or groaning. Marco himself was pinned against the wall by his own tactical gear, Bella's hand around his throat. "You want to know what makes me special?" she said, her voice unlike anything they'd heard from her before. Deep. Dangerous. Powerful. It's not my blood. It's not my DNA. It's not what Alessandro did to me. She leaned closer. It's what I chose to become despite all of it. She looked back at Dante, and something passed between them, electric, undeniable, destined. And what I choose now is. The lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in red. And in that hellish glow, they heard it, the sound of elevator doors opening. Multiple elevators. All at once. Dr. Alessandro Harrison's voice echoed through the hospital's PA system. "My dear Isabella," he said, his tone disappointed but unsurprised. "You've finally awakened. How wonderful. Now the real experiment can begin." The corridor began filling with more tactical teams. Not just a few men this time. Dozens. And leading them, still in his white coat like this was just another day at the hospital, was Alessandro himself. But he looked different now. Younger. Healthier. Enhanced. "Did you really think you were my only success?" he asked, rolling up his sleeve to reveal veins that pulsed with an unnatural blue light. "You were just the prototype, my dear. I've had 20 years to improve on the design." He smiled, and his teeth were perfect. Too perfect. "Now, let's discuss your parents. They're quite eager to see you." "Well, what's left of them?" The sub-basement of St. Helena Hospital was a nightmare made real. Alessandro led them down at gunpoint. Bella, Dante, Vincent, and the others, through corridors that shouldn't exist, past doors marked with biohazard symbols and numbers instead of names. The smell hit them first. Chemicals. Decay. Something sweet and wrong that made Rachel gag. 20 years of progress, Alessandro said conversationally, his enhanced body moving with unnatural grace. "Would you like to see your parents first, Isabella? Or should we start with the others who weren't quite as successful as you?" He opened a door. Inside were rows of beds. Each held a patient connected to machines that pumped blue-tinted fluid into their veins. Some were conscious, staring at nothing. Others writhed against restraints. All of them were dying. "The merge process," Alessandro explained, "has a 97% failure rate. Your survival was a miracle. One I've been trying to replicate ever since." Bella's legs gave out. Dante caught her, his own strength failing, both of them sinking to their knees. "How many?" she whispered. "Hundreds. Over the years." Alessandro checked a chart. "Your parents are in the next room. Still alive, technically. Though I'm afraid the repeated experiments have left them changed." He opened another door. And Bella screamed. The things in the beds barely looked human anymore. Lucia Romano's beautiful face was distorted, half-melted, her body twisted from years of genetic manipulation. Michael Valet was worse, conscious but mad, his eyes wild and unseeing, babbling in a mixture of Italian and something that wasn't quite language. "Mom." Bella reached for the glass partition. "Dad." Lucia's head turned slowly, mechanically. When she saw Bella, she opened her mouth. And screamed. Screamed like she was burning. Screamed like she'd been screaming for 20 years. "She remembers you," Alessandro said clinically. "Part of her, anyway. The part that knows she failed to protect you." Vincent collapsed against the wall, sobbing. "My sister, what did you do to my sister?" "I tried to recreate Isabella's perfect merger. Your sister volunteered, actually. Thought if she could become like her daughter, she could find her. Save her." Alessandro smiled. Hope is such a powerful motivator. Dante pulled Bella against him, trying to shield her from the sight, but she couldn't look away from her parents' destroyed bodies. "Kill them," she whispered. "Please. Just let them die." "Oh, I will. Right after you watch." Alessandro nodded to his men. They began disconnecting the machines. Lucia and Michael started convulsing immediately. "Stop." Dante roared, struggling against the men holding him. You've made your point. Have I? Alessandro pulled out a syringe filled with blue fluid. You still don't understand. Isabella's blood only works when she's at maximum emotional distress. When every barrier is broken. When she has nothing left to lose. He grabbed Dante by the throat, enhanced strength making resistance impossible. When she watches the man she loves die. The needle pressed against Dante's neck. No. Bella fought against her captors. Take me instead. My blood, my life, everything, just don't. You love him. Alessandro sounded delighted. Perfect. The emotional cortisol spike should activate the final sequence. The needle pierced Dante's skin. Blue fire raced through his veins. He convulsed, his body rejecting the foreign substance, his organs beginning to shut down. Bella felt something inside her snap. And then, darkness. Real darkness. Every light in the hospital went out. Every machine. Every piece of electronic equipment. In the absolute blackness, Bella's voice was different. Ancient. Terrible. You wanted to see what I really am. The emergency generators kicked in, and immediately exploded. You wanted my full potential. The temperature in the room plummeted 20 degrees. You should have left us alone. When the backup lighting finally flickered on, Bella was standing. The men who'd been holding her were unconscious. Or dead. It was hard to tell. Her eyes were completely black, no whites, no iris, just endless dark. And her hands were glowing with that same blue light that had been killing Dante. But in her, it wasn't poison. It was power. The blue light pulsing from Bella's hands wasn't destructive, it was something else entirely. Healing. Pure, undiluted life force. She moved through the darkness like a ghost, reaching Dante in 3 strides. Her glowing hands pressed against his chest, and the blue poison in his veins began to change, transform, purify. I understand now, she whispered, her voice echoing with harmonics that shouldn't exist. The merger wasn't about genetics. It was about choice. About choosing to embrace both sides, light and dark, healing and hurting, Romano and Valet. Dante gasped, his back arching as the corruption left his body. His eyes flew open and met hers, those impossible black eyes, and he saw her. Really saw her. Not the nurse. Not the lost girl. Not the weapon Alessandro had tried to create. He saw the woman who'd chosen to save him. Who'd chosen to love him despite everything. Bella, he breathed. I'm here, she said, and her voice was both the Bella he knew and something more. I'm not leaving you. Alessandro stepped back, for the first time showing fear. This isn't possible, he said. The readings never showed, you were never capable of. Because you were measuring the wrong thing. Bella stood, helping Dante to his feet. You thought power came from the blood. From forcing the bloodlines together. From trauma and pain and control. She turned to face him, and the blue light spread from her hands up her arms, creating patterns that looked almost like wings. But real power comes from choice. From love. From the connections we make despite the blood we carry. She looked at Vincent, who was staring at her in awe and terror. Uncle, she said, and the word made him flinch. Your sister is still in there. Buried under Alessandro's experiments, but alive. I can feel her. Then to the tactical teams surrounding them. Half of you have family members in these beds. Sons, daughters, brothers who disappeared over the years. Alessandro told you they died. He lied. The men exchanged glances, their weapons wavering. Bella raised her glowing hands. I can heal them. All of them. But first, we end this. Alessandro laughed, but it was forced. You think you can heal 20 years of genetic damage? You think your little light show can undo? Yes. The certainty in her voice stopped him cold. Because I'm not doing it alone. She reached for Dante with one hand and, surprisingly, Vincent with the other. The war between our families created this. Maybe peace can destroy it. Vincent looked at Dante, the man whose family had killed his son, destroyed his sister, taken everything. Dante looked back, seeing the man who'd tried to kill him, who'd perpetuated a war that had claimed countless lives. And then they looked at Bella. The bridge between them. The hope neither had believed in. Vincent took her hand. Dante took the other. And the blue light exploded. What happened next was not science. It was not medicine. It was something older, deeper, the power of connection, of forgiveness, of choosing to heal rather than hurt. The light spread from their joined hands, racing through the facility like wildfire. It touched the patients in the beds, and they began to stabilize. It reached Lucia and Michael, and their tortured screaming stopped. It found every person Alessandro had experimented on, marked, changed, and began to undo the damage. But more than that, it revealed the truth. Every tactical soldier saw the faces of the patients clearly. Recognized them. Family members they'd been told were dead. Friends who'd disappeared. My brother, one soldier gasped, dropping his weapon. You told me he died in a car accident. My daughter, another whispered. She's been here? All this time. The tide turned in an instant. Weapons swung toward Alessandro. No, he snarled, pulling out a device. If I can't have the secret, no one can. The device was a dead man's switch. If he let go, the entire facility would be flooded with a toxin that would kill everyone in minutes. You want to save them all, Isabella? Then you come with me. Now. Or everyone dies. Bella looked at the device. At Alessandro. At the rooms full of victims. Then she looked at Dante. Trust me, she said. Always, he replied without hesitation. She smiled, and it was pure Bella, the nurse who'd walked into his room that first night, unafraid. Alessandro, she said, turning back to him. You made one mistake. What's that? You gave me your enhancement. Your 20 years of improvement. She raised her hand, and the blue light condensed, focused, became something sharp and precise. Which means I can feel every enhanced cell in your body. Alessandro's eyes widened. And I can turn them off. The light shot from her hand like lightning, striking Alessandro in the chest. He convulsed, his enhanced muscles failing, his perfect body reverting to what it should be, a 70-year-old man who'd spent 2 decades in a lab. The device fell from his weakened fingers. Vincent caught it before it hit the ground. Alessandro collapsed, aging 20 years in 20 seconds, his stolen youth evaporating. How? He gasped. Bella knelt beside him, and for a moment, she was just the compassionate nurse again. Because healing isn't just about adding, she said softly. Sometimes it's about taking away what doesn't belong. Around them, the facility was transforming. Patients were sitting up, their minds clearing for the first time in years. Families were reuniting, soldiers finding brothers, sisters, children they'd thought lost forever. And in a bed in the corner, 2 figures were stirring. Bella. The voice was weak, hoarse from years of screaming, but it was real. Lucia Romano Valle was awake. Truly awake. Beside her, Michael Valle's eyes were clear, sane, fixed on his daughter. My baby girl, Lucia whispered. You found us. No, Mom, Bella said, tears streaming down her face as she ran to them. You held on. You both held on until I was strong enough to find you. But even as families reunited and wounds healed, Bella knew this wasn't over. Because Alessandro, dying on the floor, was laughing. You think you've won, he coughed. You have no idea what you've started. The people who funded this project, they won't let you walk away. They'll come for you. For all of you. Dante stood over him, every inch the Mafia boss despite his hospital gown. Let them come, he said. They'll find the Valle and Romano families united. They'll find an army of people you tortured, now healed and ready for vengeance. He looked at Vincent, who nodded, a silent agreement, a peace treaty written in shared purpose. They'll find us ready. Alessandro's laughter turned to coughing. The formula, everything I learned, it's all uploaded. They already have it. They'll make more like her. Better. Stronger. No, Bella said quietly. They won't. She placed her glowing hand on Alessandro's forehead. Because the formula was never in my blood. It was in my choice. And that's something you can't replicate in a lab. Alessandro's eyes widened as he felt her power one last time, not healing, not harming, but showing him the truth he'd missed. Every success she'd had. Every patient who'd healed faster. Every miracle. It hadn't been her blood. It had been her touch. Her care. Her choice to heal. The one thing he could never synthesize. Love. Impossible, he whispered. No, Bella said. Human. Alessandro Harrison closed his eyes for the last time, defeated not by violence, but by the one force he'd never understood. The organization came for them 3 hours later. Not with subtlety. Not with stealth. With a full tactical assault. Black SUVs surrounded St. Helena Hospital. Helicopters circled overhead. Armed operatives in unmarked uniforms established a perimeter, evacuating civilians and sealing every exit. The message was clear: no one leaves until we have what we came for. In the hospital's main lobby, Bella stood with Dante on one side and Vincent on the other. Behind them, a united force that would have been unthinkable 24 hours ago. Valet soldiers standing shoulder to shoulder with Romano enforcers, hospital staff who'd chosen to stay and fight, and former test subjects who'd been healed but hadn't forgotten what was done to them. An army born from pain, forged in healing, united by choice. The doors opened. A woman entered, 50s, immaculate suit, the kind of cold beauty that came from never doubting your own power. Her heels clicked against the marble floor like a countdown. Isabella Romano Valet, she said, her voice crisp and corporate. My name is Catherine Shepard. I represent the Prometheus Collective. We funded Dr. Harrison's research for 2 decades. Invested billions in his vision of human evolution. She stopped 10 feet away, flanked by her own security. You're the culmination of that investment. And you belong to us. Bella's laugh was soft but dangerous. I don't belong to anyone. Legally, ethically, financially, yes, you do. Every treatment, every test, every moment of your existence since the fire was funded by our organization. You're our intellectual property. She's a human being, Dante growled. Catherine's eyes flicked to him with mild interest. Mr. Valet. The criminal who got himself shot to facilitate Dr. Harrison's final phase. How's the wound? I imagine Isabella healed it quite thoroughly. She looked past them to the gathered crowd. Dr. Harrison uploaded his complete findings to our servers before his unfortunate demise. We have the genetic sequences, the enhancement protocols, the merger process. We don't actually need Isabella alive anymore. The threat hung in the air. But, Catherine continued, we'd prefer to avoid unnecessary bloodshed. Isabella comes with us voluntarily, we study how her abilities manifest, and everyone else walks away. You have 60 seconds to decide. Bella felt Dante tense beside her, ready to fight, to die if necessary. She felt Vincent's rage, barely contained, decades of violence ready to explode. She felt her parents, still weak but alive, watching from wheelchairs behind the line, silently begging her not to sacrifice herself again. And she felt something else. The blue light inside her, pulsing, ready. But also the memories of every patient she'd ever treated. Every hand she'd held. Every life she'd saved by simply being present, being caring, being human. Alessandro had been wrong about the source of her power. But he'd been right about one thing. She was unique. You uploaded the formula, Bella said. Every detail, Catherine confirmed. The genetic sequences. The enhancement protocols. The merger process. Exactly. Bella smiled. Then you already know the truth that Alessandro died learning. Catherine's confident expression flickered. What truth? That it doesn't work. Bella stepped forward, and the blue light began to emanate from her, not threatening, just present. Alessandro spent 20 years trying to replicate what happened to me. Hundreds of subjects. Billions of dollars. He tried every combination, every variable, every possible scientific approach. Another step. And they all failed. Every single one except me. Because you had both bloodlines, Catherine said, but her voice had lost its certainty. No. Bella stopped directly in front of her. Because I had something he could never measure in a lab. Something that's not in my DNA or my blood or any formula you uploaded. She looked back at Dante, the man who'd stood between her and danger despite his wounds. At Vincent, who'd chosen peace over vengeance. At her parents, who'd somehow held on to sanity through 20 years of torture because they believed they'd see how again. Love, Bella said simply. The formula is love. Catherine's face hardened. That's not science. Isn't it? Bella gestured to the crowd behind her. Every person Dr. Harrison experimented on failed because he tried to force the merger. To create it through trauma and pain and genetic manipulation. But healing, real healing, the kind that changes you at a cellular level, only happens when you choose it. When you're connected to something bigger than yourself. She held up her glowing hands. My blood isn't special because of the merger. It's special because I spent 15 years choosing to heal instead of hurt. Choosing to connect instead of isolate. Choosing love over the hatred that both my families tried to teach me. The light grew brighter. You can't bottle that, Ms. Shepherd. You can't synthesize it. You can't force it into anyone who doesn't choose it themselves. Catherine pulled out a tablet, scrolling frantically through data. Her face went pale as she found what she was looking for. The emotional markers, she whispered. Harrison noted them but said he said they were irrelevant variables. He was wrong. Bella's voice was gentle now, almost pitying. He spent 20 years looking at me as a formula to crack instead of a person to understand. And now you're making the same mistake. There has to be a way to. There is. Everyone turned to look at Bella. You want enhanced soldiers? Healers? People who can merge the best parts of conflicting natures? Then stop trying to create them in labs. She gestured to the hospital around them. Create communities. Build connections. Invest those billions in bringing people together instead of tearing them apart for research. The power you're looking for doesn't come from DNA. It comes from choice. From love. From being human in the fullest sense of the word. Catherine stared at her like she was speaking a foreign language. Behind Bella, Vincent stepped forward. My niece is right, he said, his voice carrying the weight of 20 years of regret. I spent 2 decades at war with the Valets because I thought strength came from revenge. From hate. From refusing to let go. He looked at Dante. But standing here now, fighting beside my enemy, protecting the daughter of my sister and his uncle, this is the strongest I've felt in 20 years. Dante nodded, moving to stand beside them both. The Prometheus Collective wants to create something powerful. His voice carried the authority of a man who'd commanded empires. Then fund unity. Fund healing. Fund love. He looked at Bella, and everyone in the room could see it, the way his eyes softened, the way his whole being oriented toward her. Because nothing I've built in 30 years of power, all the money, all the control, all the fear, none of it made me feel as strong as loving her does. The silence that followed was profound. Catherine Shepherd stood frozen, her entire worldview cracking. Behind her, several of her operatives had lowered their weapons slightly, affected by words they'd never expected to hear in a corporate extraction. This is. Catherine started, then stopped. Tried again. We've invested billions in the wrong thing, Bella finished gently. But it's not too late to invest in the right thing. She gestured to the survivors behind her, patients Alessandro had tortured, families reunited, former enemies standing together. These people are the real miracle. Not because of their DNA, but because they survived. Because they chose to heal. Because they are stronger together than they ever were apart. Bella's light began to fade, returning her eyes to their normal dark brown. You can try to take me by force. You can kill everyone here and dissect my body for secrets. But you'll find the same thing Alessandro found, nothing. Because the power isn't in me. It's in all of us. In every choice we make to connect instead of divide. She extended her hand to Catherine. Or you can choose differently. Use your resources to help these people rebuild. To reunite families. To create community instead of destroying it for profit. Catherine stared at the offered hand like it might bite her. Then, slowly, something changed in her face. Not defeat. Something else. Recognition. My daughter, she said softly, unexpectedly. She died 3 years ago. Cancer. The treatments, nothing worked. I joined Prometheus because they promised to make sure no one else would have to watch their child. Her voice broke. But they lied. We've been so focused on creating miracles in labs that we forgot how to be human to each other. She looked at the hand still extended toward her. And took it. The moment their hands touched, something extraordinary happened. Not dramatic. Not explosive. Just, true. Bella's residual light flowed into Catherine, not healing any physical wound, but touching something deeper. The grief. The rage. The years of misdirected pain that had led her to this moment. "I'm sorry about your daughter," Bella said quietly. And Catherine Shepherd, head of the Prometheus Collective, one of the most powerful women in the world, broke down sobbing in the arms of a nurse she'd come to abduct. Around them, the tension shattered. Operatives lowered weapons. The Romano and Valet forces relaxed. Somewhere in the crowd, someone started clapping, slow, genuine applause that spread through the room. Not for victory. For change. For the moment when everything could have gone wrong but chose to go right. 2 hours later, contracts were being drawn up. The Prometheus Collective would fund the medical treatment of all Alessandro's victims. Would help reunite families. Would redirect their research toward actual healing instead of enhancement. Catherine would personally oversee the transition, her daughter's memory finally honored by helping instead of hurting. And in a quiet corner of the lobby, while lawyers and family members and former enemies worked out the details of their new world, Bella and Dante finally had a moment alone. "You saved all of us," Dante said, his hand finding hers. "We saved each other," Bella corrected. She touched his side gently, where the wound had been. Where nothing remained but smooth, healed skin. "You stood between me and death despite barely being able to stand. You chose me over everything." "I'd choose you over anything," he said simply. "Every time. For the rest of my life." "Dante. I know it's fast. I know we barely know each other. I know there are 1,000 reasons why we shouldn't." She kissed him. Soft. Sweet. Full of promise. When they broke apart, both were smiling. "I healed you," she whispered against his lips. "You healed me. That's not fast. That's inevitable." The dawn broke over New York City, painting St. Helena Hospital in shades of gold and pink. Bella stood at the window of what had been Dante's room, room 417, where everything had changed, watching the sunrise with her parents beside her. Lucia was still weak, leaning on Michael for support, but her eyes were clear. Present. Alive in ways that mattered beyond just breathing. "I can't believe you became a nurse," Lucia said, her voice still hoarse but warming with pride. "After everything that was done to you, you chose to heal." "I had good examples," Bella said, taking her mother's hand. "You held on for 20 years because you believed you'd see me again. That's a kind of healing too." Michael wrapped his arm around his daughter, and for the first time in her conscious memory, Bella felt what it meant to be held by her father. Safe. Loved. Complete. "The families," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Vincent told me what you did. How you brought the Romanos and Valets together. Your mother and I, that's all we ever wanted." "I know, Dad." Bella leaned into him. "I read the letters you wrote. The ones Alessandro kept in his files. You both tried so hard to create peace." "And failed," Lucia whispered. "No." Bella looked at both of them. "You created me. And I finished what you started." Downstairs in the hospital chapel, a space that had witnessed countless prayers, confessions, and desperate bargains with God, something unprecedented was happening. Vincent Romano stood across from Dante Valet. Not as enemies. Not as rivals. As family. "My father would have killed me for this," Vincent said, but there was no anger in his voice. Only tired acceptance. "Standing here. Calling a truce with a Valet." "Mine too," Dante admitted. He extended his hand. "But they are not here. We are. And I'm tired of living for ghosts." Vincent stared at the offered hand, the same hand that had pulled triggers, made deals, built empires on the foundation of their blood feud. And he took it. Not just a handshake. A pull into an embrace. Two men who'd lost everything to hatred, choosing something different. "My niece loves you," Vincent said, his voice thick. "I can see it. The way she looks at you, it's how my sister looked at your uncle." "I love her too," Dante said simply. "More than power. More than legacy. More than anything I've ever built." "Then don't waste it like they did." Vincent pulled back, his eyes fierce. "Don't let pride or fear or the old ways destroy what you have. Promise me." "I promise." They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of 20 years of war finally lifting. The families will follow our lead, Vincent said. If we stand together, they'll stand together. Then let's give them something to stand for, Dante replied. Not territory or power or revenge. Something better. What's that? The future. In the hospital's main conference room, lawyers were finalizing the agreements. Catherine Shepard sat across from representatives of both the Romano and Vallee families, her corporate armor slightly cracked, revealing the grieving mother beneath. The Prometheus Collective will establish the Lucia and Michael Foundation, she was saying, her voice steady despite the emotion behind it. Dedicated to reuniting families torn apart by our research. Full medical care for all of Alessandro's victims. Counseling. Housing. Whatever they need to rebuild their lives. She looked directly at the camera where Bella was watching via video feed from upstairs. It won't undo what was done. But it's a start. Bella nodded, accepting the apology implicit in every word. There's one more thing, Catherine added. The hospital. St. Helena has been compromised by what happened here. The board wants to shut it down, bury the scandal. Murmurs of concern rippled through the room. Unless, Catherine continued, someone was willing to take it over. Transform it into something new. A place that actually lives up to its mission of healing. She pulled out a document. Prometheus is prepared to fund a complete reorganization. New leadership. New mission statement. A hospital that treats everyone, regardless of their ability to pay, their background, their family connections. She looked between the Romano and Vallee representatives. If the families would be willing to co-sponsor it. To make it a symbol of what's possible when we choose unity over division. The silence that followed was heavy with possibility. Then Vincent stood. The Romano family agrees. Dante rose beside him. As does the Vallee family. Catherine smiled, a real smile, possibly the first genuine one she'd worn in years. Then let's build something beautiful from these ashes. Outside the conference room, Bella waited for Dante. When he emerged, his eyes found her immediately, like they would for the rest of his life, she suspected. Like she was the North Star and he was finally done wandering. Walk with me, he asked, extending his hand. She took it without hesitation. They walked through the hospital corridors, past the nurse's station where Bella had worked so many shifts, past the supply closet where she'd hidden to cry after losing patients, past room 417 where their story had truly begun. I've been thinking, Dante said as they reached the rooftop access. About what happens now. About what we do with this gift we've been given. He pushed open the door, and they stepped into the morning light. The city spread below them, millions of people, millions of stories, all interconnected in ways they'd never fully understand. I spent my whole life taking, Dante continued. Building power by diminishing others. Creating wealth through fear. I told myself it was business, it was legacy, it was just the way things were done. He turned to face her fully. But you showed me something different. You showed me that real power, the kind that actually changes things, comes from giving. From healing. From choosing love even when hate would be easier. Bella's eyes misted. Dante. I'm not asking you to fix me, he said quickly. I know that's not your job. I'm not asking you to save me or redeem me or make me worthy of you. He took both her hands in his. I'm asking if you'll let me spend the rest of my life trying to be the man you saw in me when you walked into that room. The man you believed in when everyone else saw a monster. You were never a monster, Bella said fiercely. You were a man who'd been taught the wrong lessons. Who'd survived by becoming what the world expected. But that's not who you really are. She touched his face gently. I didn't see potential in you that first night. I saw you. The real you, buried under years of armor and anger and pain. And that man, the one standing here right now, choosing differently, choosing better, is exactly who I want beside me. Bella Marino, Dante said, his voice breaking with emotion. Will you? She kissed him before he could finish. Deep. Sure. Full of every promise she'd spent 15 years too afraid to make. When they broke apart, both were crying and laughing and holding each other like they'd never let go. Yes, she whispered against his lips. To whatever you were going to ask. To everything. To us. Yes. Below them, in the hospital, families were reuniting. Former test subjects were being discharged into the care of loved ones they'd thought they'd lost forever. Romano and Valet soldiers were shaking hands, exchanging phone numbers, making plans to meet for coffee instead of conflict. Dr. Reeves was accepting the position of chief of medicine for the newly reorganized hospital, her hands shaking with the weight and honor of it. Rachel, the young nurse, was holding the hand of a patient, one of Alessandro's victims, and promising him that things would be different now. Better now. Catherine Shepherd was on the phone with her board, her voice strong and certain, telling them that Prometheus was changing direction. That profit wasn't worth more than people. That her daughter's memory deserved better than the company they'd become. Vincent was sitting with Lucia and Michael, the three of them crying and laughing and beginning the long, beautiful work of healing together. And on the rooftop, two people who should have been enemies, who'd been designed by fate and genetics and corporate greed to be pawns in someone else's game, were choosing their own story, writing their own ending, creating their own beginning. What do we do now? Dante asked, still holding Bella close. She smiled, thinking of all the patients who needed care, all the families who needed reuniting, all the healing that still needed to happen. Thinking of her parents, recovering but present. Of the families, united but fragile. Of the hospital, transformed but still being built. Of the city below them, full of people who needed hope. And of the man beside her, who'd chosen love over everything he'd ever known. Now, Bella said, we heal. We build. We love. We show everyone that the power they're looking for isn't in formulas or DNA or forcing people to be what they are not. She looked up at him, her eyes clear and certain. We show them that the miracle is in the choice. In choosing each other. In choosing to be better than what we were taught. In choosing to create something beautiful from all this pain. Dante kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. Then let's get started, he whispered. And hand in hand, they walked back inside. Back to the work of healing. Back to their families. Back to the messy, beautiful, complicated business of choosing love over fear, unity over division, hope over despair. Back to their life. Together. Because in the end, that's what every story is really about, not the darkness we survive, but the light we choose to create. Not the pain we inherit, but the healing we pass on. Not the fear that tries to control us, but the love that sets us free. Bella and Dante found each other in the middle of a war. And they ended it by simply refusing to fight. By choosing each other. By choosing love. And that, more than any genetic enhancement or corporate conspiracy or family legacy, was the real miracle. We have come to the end of the story. Thank you for watching to the end. Share your opinion about this story in the comments below. I like getting feedback from my audience. Also, don't forget to like, subscribe and hit the notification bell so you won't miss any of our heartwarming stories.